New York is the second largest city in the world with skyscrapers. Among the skyscrapers in it is the Central Park Tower located in the Manhattan area, and it is considered almost the second largest tower in the United States of America. Another skyscraper is the Empire State, which consists of 102 floors. And the number of skyscrapers that fill Manhattan specifically, or New York in general, is more than 230 skyscrapers. The strange thing is that if we go back in time a little bit, almost 200 years, we will notice something very strange. 200 years ago, but for the same place, it was a group of forests, grass and water pools. And the topic isn't just about skyscrapers. Any other landmark of America, whether roads, tunnels, or even houses and gardens, if we go back 200 years, we will find that all these things do not exist. But how did all this development happen within 200 years only? What are the ingredients that helped America remain what we know today? In the American continent, thousands of years ago, there were people living in peace. They were peasants, fishermen, and others, and their situation was stable for many years. They are the owners of the land, and they are the Native Americans. This people was passing by from time to time some people from other continents. They were visited by a number of Germanic tribes, and people from the Mali Empire visited them in 1311 AD, and they were also visited by the Muslim captain, Ahmed Muhyiddin Biri. He even drew a complete map of America in the early 16th century. All these people, after meeting the indigenous people of the Americas, left them alone and walked. Until then, someone named Christopher Columbus came, who was lost at sea, and suddenly his ship docked on the shores of America. After a period of time, his companions came from Europe and saw the American Indians, who are the original inhabitants, and saw the new continent. The Europeans and the inhabitants of England, when they invaded the American continent, took advantage of the weaknesses of the people in the place and began to establish themselves as owners of the land. And they began to exterminate the indigenous population in the most brutal ways. Britain decided to impose taxes on the English who traveled to their new settlement, and who will call them later the Americans. When these Americans reached decisions regarding new taxes, they began directing letters to Britain and demanding human rights and social justice, as if they did not kill thousands of indigenous people. The important thing is that in the end some historical events and a number of civil revolutions and wars took place. To some extent, America became independent from Britain in 1776, and its name remained the United States of America. A year later, they wrote their own constitution, political parties emerged, and they wrote a national anthem, and a new state emerged, consisting of a manpower of no more than 4 million people. At the beginning, the American government and people were trying in every way to absorb all innovations from Americans or immigrants from outside the country. This was and still is the most important reason for America's success in all fields. America is trying to include the largest number of immigrants of all nationalities. They had what is called random immigration. Through this immigration, America tries every year to include 50,000 people, and they began to encourage inventors, doctors, investors, and others, as long as their projects would eventually be in the interests of America. From this concept, America embarked on the path of leadership. Modern scientific inventions were the reason that they changed America and even the whole world. One of the most important inventions was electricity. The entry of electricity into life in general and industry in particular had a very significant impact on the huge cultural shift that took place in the whole world. Electricity is not an American invention. Electricity, in order to show us its current form, has gone through many stages, starting with Greece in 600 BC from the moment they discovered static electricity, passing by William Gilbert, Alessandro Volta, André Ampère, George Ohm, Michael Faraday, and many others. But this long chain was ultimately destined to serve the United States in its favor. Those who developed electricity in its modern concept are the American Thomas Edison and the Serbian-American Nikola Tesla. That is why the first electric power station in the whole world was the Share of America, which contained 6 of the greatest generators ever. Each one of them weighed more than 30 tons. Now electricity is available and motors are also available. Why don't we go to the industry? If we follow the American economic march, we will find that one of the government's priorities is to establish industrial growth, and this began specifically in the first quarter of the 20th century. One of the most important industries that helped in American economic growth is the steel industry, oil, railways, and finally cars. This period was called the Age of Heavy Industry. As for the auto industry, This is a story on its own. We wouldn't be exaggerating if we said that the automobile industry is one of the most important elements of the economic renaissance that took place in the entire United States of America. In the year 1900 AD, the United States estimated that it manufactured 4,000 cars, and after that, only a few years later, and in 1903, 57 car companies appeared. 27 of them declared bankruptcy after that. Among the American companies that started operating in 1903 and still exist today is Ford Motors, which is well known. What helped Ford achieve success at its inception is that its largest owner, Henry Ford, decided that he would produce a new type of car that would be suitable for the general public at a time when owning a car was the preserve of the rich only. In 1908, Henry came out with a model called the Model T. It really was the people's car. Its price was very cheap compared to other cars, and the cost of running it did not exceed a cent for every mile traveled. This model was followed by about 10 and 60 cars in the first year, and by the year 1916, it was followed by about 73,000 cars. In just 19 years, Ford estimated that it would manufacture about 15 million cars. And all this while we are still in the early 20th century. Because of Ford, the automobile industry has become the most important and largest industry for the American economy. However, due to the spread of cars, the roads have changed and paved greatly. When we come to talk about the second and most important reason for the development of America, it is its entry into the First World War. Although it entered late, it was the most beneficial country. At the end of the summer of 1914 AD, the Allied forces clashed with the Axis forces, and America initially entered the war shyly. It means that he did not enter the war in full force. That is why, at a time when all the countries of the war were economically collapsing, American exports of products increased, and in only 5 months of the second year of the war, countries imported about 18 million bags of wheat from the United States of America. The incomes of American farmers more than doubled, and the value of land, buildings, and farm equipment rose by 30%. And after the European markets were the ones that supplied America with commodities, the American markets became flooded with orders like rain. The topic did not stop at commodities and products only. European countries were very weak after the war and suffered from depression for a long time, to the extent that most countries were not able to buy even their basic needs. And who was the most resourceful at the time? America. Indeed, Europe began resorting to America and approaching it, with an interest rate of 5%. The debts of European countries exceeded billions of dollars. As a result of the worsening situation in Europe, the entire world went to America, and it became almost the sole controller of the price of gold. In parallel, the value of the US dollar increased. America began to reap the benefits of the post-war period. And with the beginning of some countries paying off their debts, the Americans began to buy luxuries and luxury, and the production of auto factories almost doubled. Every American family now owns a private car, and at this time shops have increased, and international brands, investment banks, cinemas, radio, and the press have spread. From then until today, America has preferred to sit on the world with its economic and military power. I mean, in the end, America was able to reach what it did with the administrative intelligence that they did during the war period, and the culture and diversity that America has been trying to standardize for years in all fields.